Justice Department and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or ATF, say they did not knowingly allow guns to cross the U.S. border into Mexico in an operation that some are linking to a U.S. border agent's death. Last week, we spoke with Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, who says he has documents that prove just the opposite. Today, we're joined by Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz of Utah. He is a member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and they want to get some answers about what's happening here. Congressman, thanks for your time today.
Oh, thanks, Jenna.
All right, well, the chair of that committee, Congressman Issa, has said that he will hold the ATF in contempt if he does not get some answers. Has any new information been forthcoming to you?
Well, Chairman Issa issued a subpoena, as we're allowed to do in the Oversight Committee, demanding documents from the Department of Justice and specifically the ATF, wanting to understand what happened with Operation Gunrunner and Operation Fast and Furious. This was an operation where we put over 1,500 guns in an effort to try to figure out how these bad guys were moving guns across the border. The problem is we now have two agents dead, one an ICE officer and the other a Border Patrol agent, and guns from that found in proximity of those crime scenes. And so we're not trying to interfere with what the Department of Justice is doing with its own investigation. We're trying to do an investigation of ATF and of the Department of Justice. How in the world did they let this happen?
Well, just to be clear, because we've asked the DOJ to comment on this, here is a bit of their statement of what they had to say about the situation. They say, quote, "Because questions have been raised and so that there is not confusion, the Attorney General has also made it clear to the law enforcement agencies and prosecutors working along the southwest border that no one in the department should allow guns to illegally cross the border into Mexico." So they've made that statement, but they've yet to answer many of the questions that you and others on the committee have. Now, the ranking member, Democrat Congressman Elijah Cummings, has said, why don't we just sit down with the DOJ? Let's have a conversation with them. Would that work for you?
Well, look, I believe in that philosophy of trust but verify. And that's why we have issued a subpoena demanding these documents from the ATF, from the Department of Justice, so we can dive into that and look at the facts. And we issued a subpoena last month. That has not been answered. Senator Grassley has issued similar types of requests for documents back in January. Those have still gone unanswered. It is not good enough for the Department of Justice to say, oh, well, we'll just sit down and talk about it. No, they've got to produce the documents for our committee.
And there have been some who've said, listen, the DOJ is in the middle of criminal investigations, and so there are documents that are sensitive. They can't release those right now because of things that are under investigation. Is that enough of an explanation for you?
Well, we don't want to interfere with any sort of an investigation, but they haven't even given us a roster of the potential documents that are out there. And the reason that we know so much about this is we have some brave whistleblowers within the agencies that have provided us some of these documents. So we have good reason to suspect that this is a little bit more complex, and it actually sends up a lot of flashing red lights when the Department of Justice hasn't given us anything. They haven't given us anything at this point, and that's just not acceptable, and why we're on the verge of having to hold them in contempt, or at least the contempt proceedings move forward, because you just can't ignore a subpoena. That's not the way our nation works.
And Senator Grassley mentioned last week that